Have you ever been beside someone, yet still felt yourself slowly disappearing? Sometimes, the most painful thing in love isn't the goodbye, it's the moment you realize they'd already left long ago, even while still lying in your arms. Amid New York's glitter, a woman named Charlotte once had it all: a diamond ring, a $1 million penthouse, and a marriage everyone admired. But she finally understood on their 6th anniversary night. Nothing feels lonelier than living next to someone who no longer looks at you with love. This story begins when she walked away not to seek revenge, but to begin living again. And at the heart of her loss, she discovered something small yet life-saving. True love doesn't have to be perfect, it just has to stay. Sometimes, the most painful moment in life isn't when someone leaves you, but when you realize they had already left while still sharing the same house, embrace, and familiar smile. On the 48th floor of Hale Tower, the anniversary gala celebrating 6 years of marriage between Dorian and Charlotte Hale was still dazzling. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, Manhattan shimmered as if gilded in gold by streetlights and fireworks blooming in the distance. The clinking of crystal glasses mingled with laughter and the sound of a live jazz band in the corner. Everything was perfect, everything except love. Charlotte stood quietly in a lavender silk gown, one she had chosen with care, a replica of the dress she'd worn at the Soho art exhibition 6 years ago, the night they first met. Back then, Dorian had looked at her as if she were a living masterpiece. Now, lost in the crowd, he hadn't even noticed that she had cut her hair short. Her fingers tightened around her champagne glass, trembling slightly, not from cold, but from a breaking heartbeat. Dozens of faces in the room smiled and sparkled, yet everything felt wrapped in a misted glass to her. Across the room, Dorian, the husband once admired throughout New York for his brilliance and ruthlessness, was laughing among men with cigars and women in gowns, slit too daringly high. Charlotte knew his every gesture, the tilt of his head when he laughed, the soft tap of his finger on the glass when bored. It was all heartbreakingly familiar, because none of it was for her anymore. "Charlotte, darling." A shrill voice snapped her out of her thoughts. Whitney Fordham, the most notorious socialite in Connecticut's elite circles, stood there, smiling sweetly enough to cut glass. Her martini swayed gently in her hand, eyes scanning Charlotte as though she were inspecting a purchase. "You still have that classic style," Whitney teased, her tone dripping with mockery. "But you look a bit tired, don't you? Don't tell me there's some good news?" Charlotte smiled faintly, the kind of practiced smile women learn to survive with in this world, the smile of someone who knows that if she lets her cracks show, the crowd will come running to watch. "Just a little dizzy," she murmured, her voice soft. But Whitney wasn't listening or didn't care. Her gaze had already shifted back to Dorian, the center of every room he entered. "He really does own the spotlight, doesn't he?" Whitney leaned closer, her words sharp as a whisper. "A man like Dorian can talk about profits and still make women blush. So tell me, Charlotte, when are the two of you finally having a baby? Everyone's waiting for the news." She laughed, her martini glass catching the light, then drifted away, leaving Charlotte standing still. Charlotte took a deep breath. Her chest felt like it was being crushed. This was when she'd walk toward him, gently place her hand over his, and say, "We're going to have a baby." She had imagined that moment 100 times, how he'd pause, then that once familiar warm smile would return. He'd lift her into his arms, whisper, "Thank you for staying, for believing in me." But before she could gather her courage, Dorian's laughter rang out, followed by the words that silenced everything. "A baby with Charlotte?" he said, half joking, half contemptuous. "She hasn't even figured out how to be a decent wife, let alone a mother." The air froze. The music faltered for a beat. A few people laughed nervously. Others looked down, pretending not to hear. Dorian took a sip of his 1-year-old Glenlivet, calm as if he were discussing a business deal. "She's like an overpriced piece of furniture put in the wrong place," he said. "No matter how you turn it, it doesn't make the room look better." This time, the laughter was genuine, not from everyone, but enough to chill Charlotte's blood. She didn't hear what came next. Everything dissolved into the rushing sound of her own pulse. The champagne glass slipped from her hand and shattered against the marble floor, scattering in glittering shards. And in that instant, She knew the fracture in the crystal was the same as the final fracture in her heart. Dorian glanced her way, then turned back. "Someone clean that up," he said casually, as if a waiter had spilled water. Charlotte couldn't feel her legs. The sounds, the music, the chatter, the clinking glasses all blurred together like a storm. The tiny life, 8 weeks old, stirred inside her, as if responding to its mother's pain. She set the glass down, whispering, "Excuse me," and walked away. No one stopped her. No eyes followed. She passed the Steinway piano Dorian had played for her during their honeymoon in Napa Valley. Past the wedding photo on the staircase, where he had once promised, "I'll choose you, even if everything else fades." Now, only the echo of her footsteps filled the cold house. Standing before the bedroom mirror, she saw herself, Mrs. Hale, wife of a billionaire CEO, yet the reflection was of a stranger. Her brown hair was hastily tied, and she had dark circles under her eyes and faded lipstick. The lavender gown that once turned heads now only emphasized her emptiness. She sat on the edge of the bed, her breath unsteady, her hand resting on her stomach. "My baby," she whispered. "Tonight, I'll tell you your first story about a woman who loved too much and learned to let go." The grandfather clock in the living room struck 1:17 a.m. Outside, New York still glittered. Inside, her world had gone dark. The bedroom was so vast that even her breathing echoed. Charlotte pulled out a small box on the walnut nightstand, dark mahogany, trimmed with silver. It was the letterbox she had kept hidden for 3 years. Whenever she felt abandoned, she would write to Dorian. Not emails, not texts, letters, because writing by hand made her feel real again. Those letters had never been sent. She untied the cream ribbon and opened the lid. Inside, envelopes lay neatly stacked, each marked with dates in her delicate cursive. One slipped out, its front read, "The day you forgot my birthday for the 3rd time." She opened it. "My dearest, I waited for you all day. Not for a gift to hear you say, 'I remember,' but that's too much to ask now. I still love you, only there are nights I no longer know who I'm loving." Charlotte let out a short, broken laugh. She read another. "You're in Tokyo. I'm at home waiting. They say bad news shouldn't be told over the phone, but I have no other way. Our baby didn't make it. I wish you were here to hold my hand, even for a minute." Tears fell onto the paper, smudging the ink. Another letter, only 2 lines. "I think I've become a ghost in my own house. You've walked past me 3 times and still haven't noticed I cut my hair." She gathered the letters and set them aside. She took out a pregnancy test from the drawer, 2 unmistakable lines. Next lay the ultrasound image, labeled 8 weeks heartbeat normal. The joy she had prepared to share was now why she needed to leave. Charlotte wiped her tears and took out fresh paper. This time, she wrote not to hide, but to let go. "Dorian, I'm not leaving to hurt you. I'm leaving because I'll lose what's left of myself if I stay. You once said my future was with you, but I need a future where I can be me. I'll protect our child not from you, but from the darkness in you, where love has become a transaction. I don't want your money. I want my freedom." Charlotte. She folded the letter and placed it on the bed beside her wedding ring, the ultrasound photo, and the 6-carat Swiss engagement ring the diamond Dorian once boasted was flawless. A cold breeze slipped through the open window. The curtains swayed gently as city lights brushed across her tear-streaked face. Serene, at last, she stood, opened the closet, and took out a beige handbag. Inside were old documents, her former name, Charlotte Ann Whitaker, the name she had buried for 6 years. Putting on her coat, she opened the door and entered the hallway. The penthouse was silent. Down in the lobby, the elderly elevator attendant, Mr. Davis, looked up as she approached. "Out so late, Mrs. Hale?" he asked kindly. Charlotte smiled faintly. "Just taking a walk, Mr. Davis." The elevator doors closed, a soft ding. The 48th floor disappeared from her life. Outside, New York gleamed, lights flickering, people lost in motion, towers proud and tall. No one knew that, at that very moment, a woman was shedding perfection to breathe again. No fanfare, no tears for the crowd. Only a soul that finally understood love without presence is just a crystal statue with a crack. Charlotte stepped out of the building and merged into the stream of people on 7th Avenue. The night wind tangled her hair. She placed a gentle hand over her belly and whispered, "Let's go, my love." The light turned green, and her footsteps, soft as wind, but steady, marked the beginning of the most incredible escape of her life. The New York night wind carried the metallic tang of steel and exhaust. Charlotte pulled her coat collar higher, the low heels of her shoes tapping softly on the wet stone pavement. Streetlights reflected on the rain-slick ground, glimmering like shards of broken crystal fragments of the evening she had just left behind. She didn't know where she was going, but couldn't return. She couldn't see him again, or bear another cold glance or careless word. Each step was a fracture of her heart and the first beat of freedom. A gust of wind swept down the avenue. Her hair blew across her face, the cold biting her cheeks and stinging her eyes. Her phone vibrated relentlessly in her handbag, messages, calls, all from one person, Dorian. She didn't look. There was nothing left to say. The story was already over, he just hadn't realized it yet. Charlotte stopped at the corner of 23rd Street, in front of a small cafe that had closed for the night. The glass door reflected her image so unfamiliar she almost didn't recognize herself. Tousled hair, pale lips, and in her brown eyes, no light remained. A yellow cab pulled up. The driver, an elderly Italian man, looked at her kindly. "Where to, miss?" Charlotte hesitated. "Penn Station, please. It's late, you know." "I know." The cab rolled away from the glittering heart of the city. In the distance, Hale Tower still blazed like a golden lighthouse, once her home, now only a monument to two people frozen in emotional frost. She leaned her head against the cold glass, eyes closed. In her mind, she heard Dorian's voice from years ago. "I'll choose you, Charlotte, even if the world disappears." That promise had turned to dust. She pulled out a small silver USB drive from her coat pocket filled with photos, letters, and songs they once shared. She had planned to keep it as a memory, but now all she wanted was to erase everything. She couldn't bring herself to, not because she still loved him, but because it was proof she had once existed in his world, even if only as a folded page in a finished book. The taxi stopped at the station. Charlotte paid, thanked the driver, and stepped out into the dry, biting wind. Her dress fluttered as she pulled her suitcase behind her. She bought a ticket to Boston, though it was only the first stop. Her true destination lay farther, a place where no one knew her name, where no one called her Mrs. Hale. On the train, she sat by the window. The city receded behind her. The lights stretched into lines, then faded away. From her bag, she took out a leather notebook. On the first page, in delicate handwriting, it read, "Journal of the days without you." She wrote, "Day 1 of leaving. I don't know where I'm going, only that if I stayed, I'd vanish inside my own life. You said I wasn't good enough, strong enough, perfect enough. But tonight, I did the most ideal thing. I left the place that no longer loved me." Her pen trembled slightly, but the words were steady. The night train crossed the bridges over the Hudson. City lights shimmered on the water like falling stars. Charlotte looked up, and for the first time in years, she breathed deeply, a breath that belonged to no one but herself. Among the strangers dozing around her, she placed a hand over her belly. "My baby, we've begun." Outside the window, New York disappeared into the dark. Ahead lay a journey with no map, only her heart to guide her. By morning, Charlotte stopped in Portland and took a bus heading west. The air grew salty, carrying whispers of the Pacific. 3 days later, she arrived in Cascade Bay, a small seaside town in Oregon, where morning fog wrapped around wooden rooftops and church bells tolled like a steady breath. Here, no one knew who she was. And that felt peaceful. She rented a small room behind a bakery, its window facing the gray-blue ocean. Each morning, waves brushed the cliffs, salt mingling with the scent of waffles. She didn't need an alarm clock or someone else's schedule for the first time in years. She pulled out the wooden box from her suitcase, the same one from before. The only thing she had brought besides clothes and documents it held all her unsent letters, words once written through tears. She set it on the table and opened it. Soft sunlight touched the dark, time-worn wood. Inside, the cream envelopes remained, neatly stacked like scars that would never fade. She picked up the first. February 12. Dorian. I just watched an old movie where a man said, "Love doesn't die, it only changes shape. I think we've reached the final shape invisible." Another one read, "I don't need diamonds, just a look. But it seems both are luxuries to you." Charlotte smiled faintly, the smile of someone who has walked through the storm and found only wind left behind. By dusk, she walked down to the shore. In her hand were a few old letters, edges worn, ink blurred. Sitting by the waves, she let the wind tousle her hair, then released each letter into the sea. The tide pulled them away, swallowing the words that had once bound her. A seagull flew overhead, its hoarse cry cutting through the air. She looked up, feeling at last unshackled. Back in her room, she opened her old laptop. The cursor blinked on the search bar. Discreet, divorce lawyer, New York. Temporary rentals, Oregon coast. How to start over with no money. She laughed softly. How strange, she once ran public relations for a major art museum, writing multi-million-dollar campaigns. And now, she was learning how to survive. Beside the laptop lay the ultrasound photo and the pregnancy test. She brushed her fingers over the tiny image, her baby's beating heart. "Emery," she whispered. "Your name will be Emery. It means brave one. Because you're the reason I found the courage to leave." Before bed, she wrote again in her journal. Day 4. I'm no longer afraid of silence. In this silence, I can finally hear myself. That night, Charlotte dreamed of a sunlit kitchen where Dorian made coffee. He turned and smiled. But she didn't move toward him. She watched, then turned away. When she woke, she knew the dream was no longer a haunting, it was a farewell. The next morning, Charlotte brewed herself a cup of mint tea. The breeze through the window carried the scent of salt and fresh bread from the next-door bakery. She sat down, took a fresh sheet of paper, and wrote one last letter, not to Dorian, but to herself. Dear Charlotte, thank you for not giving up. Thank you for choosing yourself, even when others call it selfish. From now on, don't wait for anyone to see you. You must see yourself. Charlotte N. Whitaker. She folded the letter, placed it inside the wooden box, and closed the lid. Then she locked it away, not as a prison for sorrow, but as a museum of a past she had lived fully. Outside, the sky turned soft pink. The waves rolled gently. Charlotte drew a deep breath. Her heart still ached, but for the first time, it beat for no one else. Somewhere, thousands of miles away, Dorian Hale might still be searching for her, living in that cold penthouse, but it no longer mattered, because the woman named Charlotte Hale had died that night, and in Cascade Bay, a new one was born, Lena Whitaker. 6:32 a.m. The first light of dawn slipped through the vast glass panes of the 48th floor at Hale Tower, flooding the penthouse grand, immaculate, and cold as a gallery. Dorian Hale was still in last night's tuxedo, tie loosened, shirt creased. The smell of whiskey clung to his cuffs. He set down his glass, then poured another. Whiskey breakfast for a man who once believed himself invincible. Last night, the $1.2 billion Dubai deal was finally signed. He should have felt triumphant. His blood surged as it always did after a victory. But this morning, when he opened the door, what greeted him was silence. No scent of Ethiopian coffee brewing at dawn, no soft murmur of the radio she always turned on, no footsteps, no robe hanging on the sofa. The perfect home had become a museum of itself, displaying success, but hollow to the core. "Charlotte?" he called. No answer. He walked up the stairs, past their wedding photo on the wall. In it, he was smiling, eyes fixed on her, and Charlotte tilted her head toward him, as if he were her whole world. He paused, a faint ache flickering in his chest. What had he said last night? A joke, a laugh, a careless line before the crowd, and now every word echoed like a hammer to his skull. The bedroom door was open. The bed was neatly made, and the sheets were smooth and untouched, but at its center lay a wooden box. He recognized it immediately, the one Charlotte had always kept private, never letting anyone touch. He used to tease, "What, hiding gold in there?" She'd only smile. Now, the box sat there like a silent verdict. Dorian sat on the edge of the bed. He lifted the lid and his world collapsed. On top were 2 wedding and engagement rings glittering in the sunlight, cold as ice. Beside them, a sonogram. In the corner, 8 weeks, heartbeat confirmed. Underneath, her familiar handwriting, Baby Whitaker Hale. Healthy, strong. His heart pounded. Whitaker, her maiden name, a name he hadn't heard in 6 years. Beneath the sonogram lay a stack of cream envelopes tied with silk ribbon. His hands trembled as he untied it. The first envelope read, "The day you forgot my birthday." He opened it. The handwriting was steady, every curve tender as breath. "You don't need to buy anything. Just remember, but maybe, loving me was never on your schedule." Dorian swallowed hard. He opened another. "I lost the baby, Dorian. The doctor called it bad luck, but in my heart I know. Maybe it's because I've been alone too long. The baby couldn't survive this house just like its mother." The ink had bled with tears. He reached for another shorter this time. "You said I'm weak. But if enduring silence for 6 years isn't strength, what is?" He froze. His grip tightened. The paper shook. The sound of glass shattering from last night replayed in his head. Only now he understood. It wasn't the glass that broke. He rose, glancing around the room. On her vanity, the perfume she used every morning was half full. On her nightstand, her unfinished cup of mint tea was cold. Everything was still there except her. A strange feeling welled inside, not rage or regret, but a hollow vastness. He had commanded hundreds, closed impossible deals, yet never felt this helpless. Dorian sank to the floor, clutching the final letter from the box. White paper, blue ink, her gentle handwriting. "I'm not leaving out of hate. I'm leaving to save what's left of me. If you ever loved me, let me disappear peacefully. I'm taking your child and the love you no longer saw." The glass slipped from his hand. Whiskey spilled across the floor, mingling with the first tears he'd shed in a decade. He didn't scream or break things. He just sat there, folded in on himself like a lost child. Outside, the sun gilded Manhattan's towers, beautiful, indifferent. The city pulsed with life, unaware that a man had just lost everything that mattered. "Charlotte," he whispered, voice raw. "Where did you go?" No reply. Only wind whispering through the glass as if carrying a message from someone gone. 3 p.m. The CEO's office at Hale Tower glowed with light. Outside, employees bustled as usual. No one knew that inside, the man hailed as a legend, the one who had just closed a record-breaking deal, was quietly unraveling. On his desk, contracts from Dubai, Spain, and France piled up beside an inbox full of congratulations. He stared at them blankly. Only the ultrasound photo in his jacket pocket anchored him to what little humanity he had left. The door opened. A young woman stepped in. Chloe Park, his trusted assistant. "Mr. Hale, should I reschedule the executive meeting?" "No," he rasped. "Keep it." She placed a file on his desk, hesitating. "Sir, I noticed Mrs. Hale hasn't been home. People are worried." Dorian looked up. "She's not coming back." "Excuse me." "She's gone." Silence. Chloe stood frozen for a few seconds. She had seen Charlotte many times, the gentle woman who brought coffee for the staff, who greeted security guards by name. Chloe had once wondered how this man ever earned a woman like her. Now she understood he never truly had her. He'd only owned her shadow until the light went out. She placed the file down, her voice low but steady. "I kept some things, messages, emails, times she called, and you didn't answer. And the things you said about her in meetings." Dorian stared, speechless. Chloe opened the yellow folder and laid it before him. On top, a printout of a text from Charlotte. "Are you free for coffee? I want 5 minutes to talk." Below it, his blank reply. Then, a note from a meeting transcript. "I didn't marry an emotional machine. She's my wife, not my PR staff." The words hit him like ice water. "Why did you keep these?" he asked. "Because I thought one day you'd need to see them." She drew a breath, meeting his eyes not with anger, but disappointment. "I used to admire you, Mr. Hale. Not anymore. I'm not quitting, I'm just leaving before I become like you." And she walked out. The door shut softly, leaving him with the papers and the metallic echo of her words. Near dusk, his phone rang. The screen flashed. Eleanor Hale. He hesitated, then answered, "You're at the office?" Her voice was calm as marble. "Yes, Mother. Don't leave. I'm coming up." 15 minutes later, the door opened. Eleanor Hale entered, elegant, grey hair neatly pinned, long chocolate coat trailing behind her. She set an envelope of photos on his desk. "This," she said, "is the woman you drove away." He opened it. Photos of Charlotte smiling with Eleanor, with her little dog, beside the winter lake at Stamford. "You forgot my birthday 3 years in a row," Eleanor said quietly. But she didn't. Every year, she sent flowers and a handwritten card. She called me her dream mother. And you know what else she said? She told me you could still be forgiven. Dorian clenched his fists. "Mother, did she tell you where she went?" "No. But don't look for her with money. She hasn't vanished, Dorian. She's gone somewhere you'll never reach into her heart." She stepped closer, eyes steady on his. "An empire isn't worth a single genuine embrace. You think you're strong but weaker than the woman you dismissed." Eleanor turned and left, her heels echoing down the hall, leaving him frozen. Outside, sunset stained the skyline red. Inside, Dorian Hale, the man Forbes once called the icon of a generation unafraid of loss, sat hunched over a sonogram photo, whispering the name of the woman he'd destroyed. "Charlotte," his voice cracked, breaking into the silence. "If I ever get another chance, I'll find you. Not to bring you back, but to say I'm sorry." He bowed his head to the desk. Beyond the glass, the city lights flickered on one by one like 1,000 small hearts awakening. Just like him, finally beating again after years of darkness. New York never truly sleeps. Yet sometimes, the city becomes the clearest mirror of loneliness. Dorian Hale sat in his glass-walled office atop Hale Tower, staring toward the Hudson skyline. Cargo ships moved like faint specks of light on the dark river. Below, the streets pulsed with life car horns, voices, the wind slicing between steel and glass towers. Everything kept moving, except him. 3 days since Charlotte vanished. 3 days since he found the wooden box, the final letter, and the sonogram bearing the child's name that would never know him. He'd lost count of how many glasses he'd emptied. Each one only sharpened the memories: the gala night, her eyes, the shattering glass, and the words he could never return. "She's like an expensive piece of furniture put in the wrong place." The phone rang. He picked it up. Rebecca Torres's voice came through, steady, composed, the tone of a woman who'd helped him through many discreet investigations. "Mr. Hale, the request has been completed. The result?" A pause. "Nothing. She's gone clean. Cash payments, short-term rentals, no credit trail, no cameras. Every trace of Charlotte Hale ends that night." Dorian's grip tightened. Impossible. She couldn't erase everything. "She didn't run, Dorian," Rebecca replied softly. "She prepared, carefully, thoughtfully. And someone helped her, maybe a lawyer, maybe someone who knows how women disappear from men like you." The words struck him like a blow. "What do you mean, men like me?" "Women only vanish when they've gone unheard. And when they leave, it means they planned it a long time ago." When the call ended, the silence pressed heavily against the glass walls. He thought of all the times Charlotte had fallen quiet, the evenings she read by the window while he buried himself in meetings, the texts he never answered. All the small moments he'd dismissed now fit together like the pieces of a verdict he couldn't appeal. A knock broke his thoughts. Chloe Park stepped in, holding a folder. For the first time, her eyes met his, not with fear or respect, but with something close to pity. "Is there something wrong?" he asked. "PR needs your approval for the fall campaign. Handle it yourself." "All right." She hesitated, then placed another envelope on his desk. "And this? I think you should see." He opened it. Inside were printed copies of messages, emails, and notes Charlotte had sent to his office. "Can we have lunch today? I need to talk. I went to the doctor, good news. Come home early?" All unanswered. Beneath them lay a transcript from a board meeting a year ago, where he had publicly snapped at her. "She doesn't understand business. All feelings, no sense. I didn't marry a tear factory." He shut the folder. "How long have you kept these?" "Since the first time I saw her crying in the elevator," Chloe said quietly. The room fell still. "What are you going to do with them?" "Nothing. I just wanted you to know people like her don't disappear overnight. They fade, day by day, until no one even notices they're gone. She straightened. I'm resigning, Mr. Hale. Not because you're cruel, but because I'm afraid that if I stay, I'll forget how to be human too. The door closed. Her heels echoed down the hall, fading, like every voice that had tried to reach him. Only Dorian remained, surrounded by the soft hum of the city and the crumbling weight of his own silence. He looked around his office, the murals, the business awards, the framed Forbes cover with his smile frozen in perfection. Now they seemed to mock him. One by one, he understood. He had never run an empire. He had managed loneliness gilded with money. As the city lights flickered awake that night, Dorian sat alone in the penthouse Charlotte once called the House of Ghosts. The wooden box still rested on the table. Every glance toward it made his chest tighten. The doorbell rang. He assumed it was staff until he saw who stood there. Eleanor Hale, his mother, small frame, silver hair neatly pinned, long coat sweeping the floor. Her eyes were sharp, but something more profound than anger lay beneath them. You're free enough for visitors, I see, she said, voice dry. Mother, he stammered. No need for excuses. She walked past him and tossed an envelope of photos onto the table. Do you know what these are? He opened them. Pictures of Charlotte smiling, holding Eleanor's small dog in Connecticut. Charlotte is in the kitchen, slicing cake. Charlotte is walking with Eleanor by Stamford Lake. Mother. His voice cracked. You forgot my birthday 3 years in a row, she said evenly. But she didn't. Every year she called. She sent cards, flowers, and even baked for me. Handwritten letters, Dorian. She told me that no matter how awful my son was, he deserved forgiveness. Eleanor stepped closer, her tone trembling but fierce. Do you know what it felt like to read her letter, Dorian? A woman 8 weeks pregnant, writing, Your son says I'm unfit to be a mother, but I still want to believe he can change. Dorian bowed his head. Mother, don't say I'm sorry. You could say it for the rest of your life, and never rebuild what you destroyed. She glanced around the glittering penthouse. This isn't a home. It's a tomb for love, for humanity. Do you think you can repurchase it? You can't. Some debts are paid with your soul, not your wealth. After a moment, her voice softened. Charlotte told me once, if he ever learns to listen, I'll forgive him. Eleanor rested a hand on her son's shoulder. This is your last chance, Dorian. Don't save your company. Save what's left of you. Go find her, not to drag her back, but to understand why she left. She turned toward the door. Don't come to Connecticut. Don't come home until you know who you want to be. The door closed. Silence swallowed the room, golden light casting shadows across the face of a man once perched atop the world, now bowed beneath the ashes. Dorian looked down at the sonogram, brushing his thumb over the words 8 weeks, heartbeat confirmed. Somewhere, a tiny life was growing while he, its father, was learning how to breathe like someone alive. He opened his laptop, not to work but to write, for the first time in 10 years. To the one I broke, I don't know where you are, but I know now that silence can be louder than hate. I am learning to listen. I am learning to be human again. He saved the file and titled it, Day 1. Outside, a soft rain began to fall over New York. He was grateful for it for the first time because it disguised the tears he was no longer afraid to let fall. Cascade Bay, Oregon. A small seaside town tucked against the Pacific, where morning fog drapes the wooden houses like a shawl. The sea here doesn't roar. It breathes softly against the cliffs, like someone who's known too much pain and is learning to live slowly again. The bus stopped in front of a little bakery. Charlotte stepped down with an old suitcase. From that moment on, the name Charlotte Hale belonged to the past. She had returned to her given name, Lena Ann Whitaker. The ocean wind brushed through her hair, tasting of salt and coldness, yet somehow gentle. She looked out at the grey horizon and wondered, is there any place in this world that lets you begin again without asking why you left? The first person Lena met in Cascade Bay was Ramona Delroy, the owner of a small bookshop and cafe near the shore. A hand-painted wooden sign hung above the door, Moonlight Cafe and Books where stories and memories meet. When Lena entered, The wind chime rang softly. Behind the counter, a silver-haired woman wearing glasses was pouring coffee. She looked up, studied Lena for a moment, then smiled. "Can I help you, dear?" Lena hesitated. I'm looking for work. I can shelve books, clean, or watch the shop." Ramona's gaze softened. She saw the pale face, slender frame, and quiet eyes that held fear and gentleness. Then she nodded. "We always need people who love books. I never ask about the past, just that they show up on time." The words felt like an embrace. Lena bowed her head. "I'll be early." From that day forward, she opened the shop each morning at 7. While the town still lay beneath its blanket of fog. Her first task was to wipe the counters, arrange the books, turn on the warm amber lights, and light a lavender candle. That scent filled the room, making it feel less empty, and so did she. Outside, the sea murmured. Inside, the wall clock ticked evenly, the rhythm of a heart learning to steady again. At first, she was clumsy. Her voice trembled when customers spoke to her, her smile unfinished. But Ramona never rushed her. She'd say, "It's all right, child. Everything takes time to get used to again, even happiness." In the afternoons, Lena would sit by the front window, watching couples stroll past hand in hand or children running toward the beach. She'd rest her hand on her belly, beginning to show now. 8 weeks along. Each tiny movement inside her made her smile, even if only for a moment. Ramona would brew 2 cups of ginger tea when the shop closed at night. They sat by the window, watching the sea and talking about small things, books, weather, a novel they both loved. One evening, Ramona asked, "Do you have any family, my dear?" Lena shook her head gently. "No, just this little one." Ramona smiled. "Good. Sometimes the little one teaches you how to grow up." Lena laughed, really laughed, for the first time in months. She still dreamed, but no longer of nightmares. In her dreams, she stood in the ocean at sunset, water rising to her knees, the sky burning red. A voice in the wind whispered, "You dared to leave, Charlotte. That's courage." She'd wake with tears soft, no longer bitter. Spring came slowly to Cascade Bay. Mornings were still misted, and the sun rarely showed before noon. Lena settled into the rhythm of this quiet place, no rush, no questions. Ramona began hosting weekly story sessions for children, called Brave Little Hearts. Lena became the storyteller. Each week, she chose a tale of a princess who didn't wait for a prince, or a dragon who learned to cry. The children sat cross-legged on the floor, eyes wide. One boy, Tommy, raised his hand. "Miss Lena, does the princess ever return to her castle?" Lena smiled. "No, because she learned that home isn't the place with high walls, it's wherever she can laugh without fear." The children nodded solemnly, not fully understanding, but content. After every story, Lena felt a little lighter. She realized that in comforting others, she was healing herself. On quiet afternoons, she walked along the beach, bare feet sinking into the damp sand as waves brushed her ankles. She spoke softly to the baby inside her. "My love, there are no horns here, no shouting, just you, me, and the sea." The wind puffed her coat, tangling her hair with salt. She knew it would take a long time to forget Dorian, maybe she never honestly would. But she also knew that pain was transforming into something else, peace. That night, she wrote in her journal, "Day 42 inches Cascade Bay. I'm still here. I'm still breathing. Maybe freedom isn't forgetting someone. It's remembering, and no longer wanting to return." Ramona brought her 2 tickets to an art exhibition in the next town on an April morning. "You need to get out, Lena. Art's still the best medicine for the heart." Lena smiled. She wore a beige coat and looked at herself in the mirror before leaving. For the first time in months, she saw a real woman, not a wife, not a reflection trapped in someone's story, but someone alive. That afternoon, in a small gallery, she stood before a painting of the sea, deep blue waves, a silver storm, and a tiny boat caught in the middle. Below it, a line read, "The storm was not to drown her, but to teach her how to sail." She stood there for a long time. In that moment, Lena understood the storm in her life had never been Dorian. It had been her own fear, and now she was learning to steer through it. Back in her little room that night, she sat by the window watching the dark ocean. The baby kicked gently. "Emery," she whispered, "do you hear that? We're safe now." Outside, the waves rolled against the rocks, steady as a lullaby. And for the first time in months, Charlotte, no. Lena smiled in her sleep. Morning in May unfolded over Cascade Bay, a thin veil of mist draping the seaside town like a bridal veil over worn wooden rooftops. Inside moonlight cafe and books, Lena rearranged the classic literature shelf. Her hands moved slowly now, her belly rounded, her steps heavier, yet her heart felt lighter than it had in years. The wind chime above the door rang a sound that still made her look up instinctively. But this time, the person who entered wasn't a local customer or a child eager for story hour. A tall figure in a pale grey cashmere coat stepped in, sunglasses covering half her face. Something in Lena's chest faltered. The woman removed the glasses, and her low, steady voice broke the stillness. "You've hidden well, Charlotte." The room fell silent. Only the ticking of the clock and the scent of fresh coffee lingered in the air. Lena froze, one hand instinctively resting on her belly, her eyes fixed on the familiar face, Eleanor Hale. Silver hair neatly tied back, the composed elegance of a woman who once commanded a family empire, now standing in a quiet coastal town. "What are you doing here?" Lena asked softly, her voice trembling. Eleanor didn't answer immediately. She placed a small linen-wrapped box on the counter, pale lavender, the same hue as the silk gown Lena had worn on that fateful night. "Not to bring you back, not to defend him, to talk." Ramona stepped out from the kitchen, her gaze sweeping over them. She instantly understood that this was not a moment meant for witnesses. She set down 2 cups of ginger tea, nodded gently to Lena, and withdrew. Eleanor pulled out a chair. Lena sat opposite her. The dim light from the window caught the lines on the older woman's face, marks of time that couldn't hide the depth in her eyes. "Dorian doesn't know I'm here," Eleanor began, "and I don't intend for him to." "I don't want to see him," Lena said quietly. "I know, but I came for someone else." Her gaze lowered to Lena's belly. "The child." The air thickened. Lena instinctively folded her hands over her stomach. "You know?" "I do. She wrote me a letter before she left." "The last one." Eleanor reached into her purse and unfolded a carefully kept page. Her voice quivered slightly as she read aloud. "I'm sorry I can't stay to be your daughter-in-law, but I hope one day you'll meet your grandchild, to know that the world still holds something purer than contracts and meetings. If you can, please let them know their grandmother was once truly loved by her daughter-in-law." When she finished, Eleanor looked up. "Tell me, what mother-in-law wouldn't cry reading that?" Lena's eyes shimmered. Her voice came out as a whisper. "I don't hate you. I didn't have the strength to live in that world anymore." Eleanor sighed. "I know. And truthfully, I understand more than you think. I spent my life teaching Dorian how to win, and I forgot to teach him how to love. Maybe the fault began with me." Lena studied her quietly. Gone was the woman of banquets and press photos. Before her sat a mother wounded, humbled, human. Eleanor opened the small box. Inside lay a cream-colored knitted shawl embroidered with delicate words. "To the one who will change everything. I made it the night I read your letter," she said softly. "Not to atone, but because I needed to feel that I could still be wanted for something good." Lena touched the soft yarn, unable to stop the tears. "Thank you." There were no more words. They sat silently, 2 women from different worlds, united by loss. One had lost her son in spirit, the other her husband in love. Sunlight filtered through the curtains, settling gently over the steaming tea. No one spoke. They didn't need to. The silence itself was a form of forgiveness. Evening slowly draped the sky in honey-colored light. Ramona closed the shop early, leaving the 2 women in the small corner by the window, where the sun slipped through the blinds. Eleanor glanced around the shelves, rows of worn spines, some dusty, some frayed, all neatly arranged, all cherished. "Are you happy here?" "Yes," Lena replied. "Peaceful, and enough." "And work?" "I tell stories to the children. They're teaching me how to laugh without a reason." Eleanor smiled faintly, That sounds like a life I might envy. A soft breeze drifted in from the ocean, carrying the sound of distant waves. Dorian is still looking for you, she said. Hired investigators, the best money can buy. But nothing, and I haven't helped. Because I think some lessons only come after real loss. Lena stared down at her cup. Do you still believe he can change? I don't know. But I believe people can learn to see again, just as I've learned to see you. Not as the wife who left, but as the woman who dared to live. They entered the back garden, where a small wooden table faced the sea. The setting sun turned Eleanor's silver hair and Lena's soft curls into threads of gold. How long will you stay? A few weeks. I rented a room at the inn up the hill. If you need anything at all, I'll be there. Aren't you afraid of the press? They'll say you came chasing a runaway daughter-in-law. Eleanor chuckled softly. At my age, I fear only one thing, not doing what's right before I die. They both laughed, genuinely, freely. As the sun sank, Eleanor rose to leave. One more thing, she said gently. I know you're afraid that the past might find you. But when the baby comes, let me be there. Not as a mother-in-law, as a grandmother. Lena looked up, her eyes shining. I'll think about it. But thank you for finding me, not to pull me back, but to meet me where I finally belong. Eleanor nodded, pulling her coat close. Peace is the hardest thing to earn. Don't lose it, no matter who comes knocking. As she stepped out, Lena stood framed in the doorway, watching her go. The small figure disappeared slowly into the mist, but warmth lingered in the air like the fading scent of hot tea. That night, Lena opened her journal and wrote, Today, his mother came. Not to reclaim a daughter-in-law, but to return love. Perhaps forgiveness doesn't begin between two who loved each other, but between two who shared the same pain over one person. She set the pen down and gently stroked her belly, where Emery stirred. My darling, you have a grandmother now, a real one. Outside, the tide rose softly under the moonlight. Inside, the young mother's breath joined the rhythm of the waves, composing the first melody of a new kind of family. Not perfect, but true. Rain had fallen over New York for days. Along 7th Avenue, headlights smeared across the wet asphalt, reflecting against the cold glass walls of Hale Tower. On the 70th floor, Dorian Hale sat motionless in the dark, watching the rain. His phone buzzed, endlessly calls from Dubai, London, Tokyo, new contracts, rising stocks, and expansion into Switzerland. He didn't answer, because no amount of zeros could replace what he had lost, the woman who used to brew his coffee each morning, the one no longer living in his world. Eleanor Hale had left New York 3 weeks earlier. She didn't say where she was going. She only left a note on her son's desk. Your empire won't fall because of a failed contract, but because you've lost the reason to wake up each morning. Beside it lay a printed copy of an old email, the sender's name, Charlotte Whitaker. It read only 4 lines. If you can't love, at least learn to listen. Because silence kills faster than betrayal. Dorian stared at the screen, fingers tightening around a tarnished wedding ring. He didn't know where Charlotte was, but he knew one thing for sure: she was living, somewhere far from him. And for the first time in his life, he wanted to become someone worthy of being remembered by her, even if only as a distant memory. That morning, he entered the boardroom where 18 executives waited. No one knew this meeting would mark the end of an era, the fall of Dorian Hale, the symbol of ambition. When his assistant started the presentation, Dorian raised a hand. From today, Hale legacy will transition under the leadership of COO Benjamin Cross over the next 3 months. The room froze. Mr. Hale, someone asked, you're stepping down in the middle of our biggest expansion. Dorian nodded. Expansion for what? If the man leading it has no reason to live, I can't sign another deal without knowing why I'm doing it. A heavy silence settled. Then he stood, removed his tie, and said quietly, almost tenderly, this company was built to prove I was strong. Now I need to learn how to be weak just once, to remember that I'm still human. By evening, headlines blazed. Dorian Hale resigns. After 15 years, no official statement. The markets trembled. But in a small apartment in the Lower East Side, the man behind the headlines was packing a suitcase, a few clothes, a laptop, and an 8-week ultrasound photo. As the sun set, He taped a note to the wall, his mother's words. Love doesn't need a reason, but redemption requires action. He zipped the suitcase shut, looked around the empty room, and whispered, Charlotte, I don't know where you are, but this time, I'll look for you not with power, but with truth. That night, Dorian boarded a flight to Oregon. No security detail, no assistance, no plans. This wasn't a mission. It was a pilgrimage, the journey of a man learning how to atone. Oregon met him with damp air that smelled of salt and pine. Portland was grey, and still a world away from Manhattan's chaos. He rented an old car and drove west, following the only clue he had, a postcard Eleanor once left for him. If you truly want to find her, start where people still wait for each other without promises. In the corner, a small note. Cascade Bay, Oregon. The road wound between forests and hills, the ocean scent growing stronger with every turn. When he neared the coast, the wind whipped against the windows, waves crashing white and fierce. Above the heavy clouds, a thin beam of sunlight broke through, fragile, like hope. Cascade Bay appeared small and quiet, a few streets, a wooden church, a few cafes, and bookshops. Then he saw the sign, Moonlight Cafe and Books. His heart stuttered. He stepped inside. The bell chimed softly. An older woman looked up from wiping the counter, eyes keen, smile knowing. You must be Dorian Hale. He froze. Yes. And you are? Ramona Delroy. I own this place. As for her, she paused, then smiled gently. She's not here, but I knew you'd come. He lowered his head, humbled. Ramona poured a cup of ginger tea and set it in front of him. Drink. Don't say a word yet. People should only speak after they've learned how to listen. He lifted the cup. The warmth spread through his chest, loosening the cold that had lived there for years. Ramona looked out the window, her voice as soft as the tide. Charlotte isn't Charlotte anymore. Here, she's Lena Whitaker. She's living peacefully, working, smiling, waiting for her child. Don't break that peace. Dorian nodded. I didn't come to ask her back. I came to learn how to be a father. Ramona studied him, then finally said, All right. But promise me no explanations, no apologies in tears, only silence and kindness. That afternoon, she directed him toward the western shore. When he arrived, the sun sank, gilding the ocean in gold. Waves rolled in slow rhythm, and there on the porch of a small wooden cottage, Lena Saturday. She wore a simple white dress, loosely tied hair, and a book was open in her hands. Her belly rounded beneath the fabric, her face calm, the light tracing her like a halo on the sea. He stopped a few steps away, unable to move closer. Then she turned her head slightly and spoke, her voice quiet but steady. I know you're there. Dorian froze. Charlotte, don't call me that anymore. He swallowed hard. Lena. She looked at him then. No anger, no resentment, only a sadness so deep it had turned serene. Why are you here? Not to bring you back, he said, to learn how to be a father. A gust of wind swept between them, carrying the sound of waves. Lena clasped her hands. I don't know if you deserve that, but if you're sincere, you'll have to start from zero, no title, money, or name, just you. And this child. Dorian nodded. I understand. She held his gaze a long moment before saying, If you want to stay, then live as they do here. People don't buy love. They earn it day by day. I will, he whispered. As the sun sank below the horizon, Lena turned and walked inside. He remained on the sand, the wind tugging at his hair. No embraces, no tears, no promises, only presence, something he had never known the worth of until now. That night, Dorian rented a small room in town. No one knew his name. The next morning, he brewed coffee slowly, no whiskey, assistants, or schedules. And for the first time in years, he felt it. A beginning, not of a new empire, but of a new life. Cascade Bay woke slowly, like a sad jazz melody at dawn. Mist still clung to the wooden roofs, and the sea exhaled softly the steady breath of a giant asleep. Dorian Hale rented a small room behind a boat workshop, 2 streets from Moonlight Cafe and Books. It was bare, a creaky wooden bed, a small table, and a window facing the pine woods. No air conditioning, no luxury, only quiet. Something he'd never known he needed. He woke at 6, brewed coffee, and for the first time wondered, what is that smell? It wasn't Ethiopian beans, no gleaming espresso machine, just a simple drip brew from the town's grocery store. Bitter, slightly burnt, but real. He opened the small notebook, the one titled Day 1, and wrote, Day 15 away from the office. I haven't signed a single deal, but learned to make toast without burning it today. Progress, I guess. At first, Dorian passed the bookshop every day to glance inside. He never entered, never spoke. He watched. Sometimes Lena arranged the shelves. Sometimes she read to the children. She laughed softly and efficiently, but that laughter was no longer his. One afternoon, she dropped a box of books at the door. Reflex made him rush over. Let me help. She looked up. You don't have to. Still, he gathered the books carefully, brushed the dust off each cover, and set them back in place. No words. She watched him momentarily, then said quietly, Thank you. 2 words, yet he felt something inside him lift, as if forgiveness had cracked open a window somewhere deep within. In the following days, he found work at the cafe next door. The owner, a retired sailor, eyed him skeptically. Ever made coffee before? No. Know how to wipe tables? I can learn. And so, the former CEO who once commanded thousands now wiped tables, washed mugs, and learned to say thank you like he meant it. Every evening after work, he went to the beach. The sea wind tangled his hair, salt heavy in the air. He sat watching the horizon, thinking of all he'd once called success, the awards, the headlines, the applause now only faded snapshots. And in all of it, there was just one thing he wished he could keep, the way Charlotte had looked at him that first night in Soho, when she still believed in him. One afternoon, Ramona saw him sweeping outside. How long do you plan to do this? She asked. Until she believes I mean it. And if she never does? He smiled faintly. Then at least I'll have learned to be kind. Ramona studied him for a long time before replying, Good. But don't mistake kindness for a shortcut. He nodded. He knew now this journey had no finish line, only the choice to stay and the courage to show up again tomorrow. By July, Cascade Bay had shifted colors. Summer brought gold light and the scent of wildflowers. Lena was 8 months along. She moved more slowly now, tired more easily, yet there was a beauty to her, the kind that only peace can give after ruin. A sudden gust toppled the stand as she set books on the porch display one morning. She stumbled. From across the street, Dorian ran to her side. Careful, he said, panic rising in his voice. She steadied herself, glancing at the hand on her shoulder before quietly brushing it away. I'm fine. He stepped back, eyes lowered. Could you help me fix the stand? She asked. Yes. They worked side by side in silence. He moved gently, as if afraid of breaking the air around her. When it was done, she looked at him and asked, How long have you been here? 3 months. Not bored yet? A small town. No one knowing your name? On the contrary, it's the first place I've ever really learned to listen. She looked into his eyes, no arrogance, only fatigue, humility. Good, she said softly. From that day, Dorian began helping more, delivering boxes for Ramona, fixing windows, and sweeping floors. Lena didn't stop him, but she didn't encourage him either. Still, she no longer looked away when she saw him in the yard. One afternoon, when Ramona was out, Lena was tidying up alone. Dorian arrived carrying a bundle of dried lavender. You don't have to, she said. It's not a gift. Keeps the mosquitoes away. She laughed a quiet, genuine laugh. For a moment, they both stood still. The wind from the ocean drifted in, blending the scent of lavender with coffee and old and new fragrance at once, like memory made clean. That night, Dorian opened his notebook and wrote, Day 93. Today, she laughed. Not at me, but while I was there. Maybe presence is enough. August arrived. Lena turned 33. Ramona threw a small celebration at the shop, a few friends, nothing fancy. Dorian wasn't invited, but he stood outside the window, watching. She blew out the candles, and the light flickered across her face, He smiled not with pain, but with peace. When the party ended, Lena stepped out and found him still there. "Are you planning to stand out here forever?" "I didn't want to intrude." "You can come in. In Cascade, everyone's invited as long as they bring an honest heart." She walked back inside, leaving the door open. Dorian entered quietly, clearing glasses and wiping tables. No one said a word. Ramona glanced at him and nodded once, a silent permission. Later, when the shop emptied, Lena turned to him. "Do you know why I haven't asked you to leave?" He looked at her, waiting. "Because I see you're real now. Not the man from magazines anymore." She paused. "But real isn't enough. I must know you'll stay even when I'm gone." He nodded. He understood. From that night on, Dorian didn't ask, plead, or promise. He stayed helping, listening, waiting like a man finally learning to breathe in rhythm with another soul. Summer moved gently toward its end. The sea kept its steady rhythm. Inside Lena's small room, the sound of a fetal heartbeat pulsed from an old ultrasound machine. Outside, a man sat facing the crimson horizon, writing in his notebook, "Day 120. I don't know what tomorrow holds, but today I am here, and that is real." On the night of May 22, a storm swept through Cascade Bay. The sky was the color of iron, and waves struck the shore harder than usual. The wind tore open the window of the small wooden house by the sea, slamming it against the wall. Lena woke abruptly, her hands flying to her belly. A sharp contraction seized her so fierce she had to grip the edge of the bed. Sweat beaded her skin, though the room was cold. She looked at the clock. 3:12 a.m. The pain came in waves, short but relentless, like thousands of needles pressing at once. "No, it's not time yet," she gasped, trying to calm herself. But the baby seemed to have made its own decision. Her hands trembling, Lena reached for the phone and dialed. Ramona's raspy, worried voice answered. "Lena? What's wrong?" I think it's time. Stay calm. I'm coming right now." 10 minutes later, Ramona's old pickup truck screeched to a stop outside. Lena took slow, painful steps down the porch stairs, wrapped in the cream shawl Eleanor had knitted for the baby. The wind lashed her face cold, sharp, but the pain burned hotter. Ramona flung open the passenger door, steadying her. "Breathe, child. Don't fight it. Just breathe." Lena nodded, tears streaming. She couldn't tell if they came from pain or fear. The truck cut through the fog toward Cascade Bay Medical Center, the only hospital within 9 miles. Streetlights flashed past, mingling with the engine's hum and her ragged breathing. When they arrived, nurses rushed her into the delivery room. The contractions became stronger now, like a wave crashing against stone. The doctor babbled, 8 centimeters. Fast progress. Get ready. She's delivering soon. Lena forced a weak smile. All she could think of was Dorian's face that evening on the beach, the quiet promise in his voice. "I just want to learn how to be a father." A part of her still feared he wouldn't come, feared he would, feared she wouldn't have the strength to look at him again. Ramona squeezed her hand gently. "You're not alone, Lena. You hear me? You're not." Neither of them knew that only a few streets away, Dorian Hale sat in a late-night cafe, writing in his Day 1 journal. Then his phone rang, Ramona's name flashing on the screen. Her voice was urgent. "She's in labor. Right now." He didn't hesitate. He ran. Rain pounded against his face, cold and blinding. But he didn't slow down. By the time he reached the hospital, his clothes were soaked, his breath unsteady. Ramona met him in the hallway, eyes glistening. "Room 3. She's in pain, a lot of it." He froze before the door, hand trembling not from fear of blood, but from the terror of being unworthy to enter. "Do you think I should go in?" Ramona looked at him, her old eyes steady. "If you're truly her child's father, you don't need permission." He took a deep breath and pushed the door open. The room smelled of antiseptic, harsh white light, voices shouting orders. Lena lay on the bed, her hair damp with sweat, her face pale. When she saw him, her eyes widened. Her voice cracked. "What are you doing here?" He stepped closer, trembling. "Not to prove anything. To be here, with you." She wanted to answer, but another contraction ripped through her. She gripped the rail, crying out. Dorian rushed to her side, taking her hand. "Breathe, Lena. I'm here. You don't have to." "I do." Time dissolved. She screamed, sobbed, and crushed his hand hard enough to draw blood. He didn't flinch. He only whispered, over and over, "You're doing it. I'm sorry. I'm here. I'm not leaving. Not ever again." And then the cry. A single, piercing cry that filled the room and broke it open. 4:28 a.m. For a moment, everything stopped. Only the rhythm of Lena's breath and the tiny wail of new life, fragile, but alive, painted the world in color again. The doctor smiled beneath his mask. "She's healthy. A girl. 6 pounds, 7 ounces. You both did beautifully." Lena couldn't speak. Tears streamed down her face, exhaustion, relief, awe. Dorian leaned closer, hands shaking. He had never been so afraid to touch something so fragile that even his breath might harm it. "Would you like to hold her?" the nurse asked. He nodded, almost unable to. When the baby was placed in his arms, everything that had ever defined Dorian Hale, money, power, victory, dissolved. All that remained was a man holding a tiny, warm, impossibly real life. "Hi there," his voice cracked. The baby's eyes blinked open, cloudy, unfocused, but instantly, he swore he saw Charlotte in them. "Emery," Lena whispered. He looked up. "Emery Whitaker Hale. Our daughter." She smiled, the first smile she'd given him since the night she left, and he wept, not in shame or grief, but with the quiet surrender of someone reborn. "Emery," he murmured, "your father isn't perfect, but he's here. He's staying." The nurse stepped out, leaving the three of them together. Lena leaned back against the pillows, exhausted. "Dorian," she said softly, "this room didn't just bring a child into the world. It brought back a father." He took her hand and made a man. They said nothing more. The pink light of dawn spilled through the window, touching 3 silhouettes, mother, father, and child. Hours later, when the hospital had grown quiet, Lena slept peacefully. Dorian sat beside her, watching them both. He opened his notebook and wrote, "Day 150. Today I heard my daughter's first cry. It wasn't just the sound of life, it was the sound of forgiveness. I once thought love meant holding on. Now I know it means staying even when you're not loved back." Outside, the sky brightened. The ocean shimmered beneath the newborn Sunday. Dorian kissed his daughter's forehead and looked out the window. He knew tomorrow would still bring distance, questions, and work. But for the first time, he had found something he had never owned before. Peace in simply being there. 3 weeks after Emery was born, Cascade Bay felt like it had changed seasons. The June winds were gentler now, the sun softer, and the air carried a faint salt sweetness. The little wooden house by the shore was no longer quiet, it hummed with life. A baby's cries, a mother's lullabies, and the sound of water splashing when Dorian clumsily washed bottles in the sink. Everything was messy, exhausting but alive, like a jazz tune slightly offbeat, imperfect but beautiful. Each morning, Dorian woke early, made coffee, and fixed breakfast. He was no longer the CEO with a calendar full of meetings, just a man learning how to hold a spoon the right way for his baby girl. Emery slept in her small crib by the window, sunlight spilling across her soft brown hair like honey. "You look like your mother," Dorian whispered, "even the way you frown in your sleep." Lena stepped out of the bedroom, her hair in a bun, wrapped in a light cardigan. "Who are you talking to?" "Emery." She smiled faintly. "Good. She needs to know her father's voice." Her tone was calm, measured every word chosen with quiet care. Between them now, there was no sharp distance, only a tender stillness built on respect. In the afternoons, Dorian helped Ramona organize books at moonlight, while Lena rested at home with the baby. She read, wrote, and sometimes gazed out toward the sea. There were moments she still felt uncertain, unsure what to call what they had now. They were no longer husband and wife, but not strangers either. They were two souls raising one life, learning to forgive each other one small day at a time. At night, when Emery cried, Dorian walked her around the house, humming off-key lullabies. Lena sat on the sofa watching him. He was no longer the man of power and precision. He was simply a father trying to find his child's heartbeat. Once, when he spilled milk and Emery wailed, he panicked so hard it made her laugh. "Give her to me," Lena said, half scolding, half amused. She soothed the baby and glanced back at him. "You don't have to be perfect, just real." "I'm learning," he murmured. "I know." Silence followed, gentle, not empty. The sea outside breathed in rhythm with the small house. One night, the power went out across the town. The house fell into darkness. Lena lit candles while Dorian built a small fire in the hearth. The flickering light painted their faces gold and soft. Emery slept soundly, her breathing steady. Lena looked over at him. "Do you remember the early days in New York?" "I do," he said. "But I don't want to go back." "Why not?" "Because there, I had everything except myself." She nodded, her eyes calm, tinged with sorrow. "And here? Here, I have almost nothing. But I can begin again." Outside, an early snow began to fall soft, almost invisible. They sat quietly, watching the flames dance. Sometimes silence is the deepest conversation between two people who once broke each other. Time moved, like sand slipping through fingers. Emery grew a little more each day, her laughter filling the house, becoming its heartbeat. When she turned 6 months old, autumn arrived in Cascade Bay. Maple leaves flamed red along the hills. Moonlight Bookshop hosted its biggest story hour of the year, and Ramona persuaded Lena to be the storyteller. That afternoon, the whole town gathered. Children sat in a wide circle, while Dorian, holding Emery, sat quietly in the back. He wore a white shirt, his eyes fixed only on the two people before him. Lena opened her book, her voice low and warm. "Once upon a time, there was a house without walls. People said it wasn't a real house, but inside it lived someone who stayed little by little, each day until it became the safest place." The children stared, still and wide-eyed. Her words fell softly, like small stones into water. The one who stayed wasn't perfect, not good with pretty words. But he didn't leave anymore. And so, the house without walls became strong enough to hold two broken hearts. Lena paused, her voice trembling slightly. In Dorian's arms, Emery giggled and reached toward her mother. Laughter rippled through the room, and in that instant, every old wound felt lighter. After the reading, Ramona pulled Dorian aside, smiling. "See, that house, you're standing in it." He nodded, eyes wet. That night, they returned home. Emery slept soundly. Lena sat by the window, writing in her new journal. 3 years ago, I left to survive. Now, I stay not for love, but for peace." Dorian never asked for forgiveness. He only asked to stay, and sometimes, that's how forgiveness begins. She looked up. Dorian sat on the floor, assembling Emery's toys, clumsy but patient. He didn't know she was watching. He didn't need to. The lamplight touched his face, not the golden glow of success, but the quiet light of someone finally alive. "Dorian," she said softly. He looked up. "Yes, thank you for staying." He smiled. "I'm not going anywhere." She nodded, turning back toward the sea. The waves were the same, sometimes wild, sometimes calm, but no longer frightened her, because she knew she wasn't standing alone. A year later, a small piece appeared in the Cascade Chronicle's culture column. Charlotte Whittaker and Dorian Hale from ruin to coexistence. No remarriage, no grand vows. Just two people who once broke, choosing to stay, raising a child, and building a house without walls, a home filled with morning laughter, the scent of afternoon coffee, and peace at night. The article ended with a quote from Charlotte. "Love doesn't always mean returning. Sometimes it simply means not disappearing anymore." That evening, on the porch of their seaside home, Charlotte cradled Emery in her arms while Dorian sat beside her, strumming a few quiet notes on an old guitar. The sunset poured over Cascade Bay, golden and gentle as breath. The wind carried the mingled scents of salt and lavender. The baby's laughter, the waves, and the steady rhythm of their hearts blended into one. No one said the word happiness, but all three of them knew they were inside it.